So, John, it's great to speak to you today. You're hosting the Irish Hypnotherapy Conference 2025. For those people that haven't heard of this conference, give us a bit of an intro in terms of how it came about and just what it is.
Yeah. Well, firstly, thank you and lovely to be here. The Irish Hypnotherapy Conference came about pretty much 2 years ago in London at the UK convention. I was sitting there with a bunch of friends and said, why don't we have one of these at home? And literally within about 3 months, um, I think I'd met Freddie Jackman or 2.5 months. He said yes. And then Carl Smith said yes. And then suddenly just the whole thing just rolled. So the first conference was held in Arklow in just about an hour south of Dublin in May 23. We had 50 people attend and eight speakers. And then last year we moved it to Dublin and there was 20 speakers and over 100 people attended. And then this year it's over 30 speakers and over 250, 300. I can't tell you where the final numbers will end. But basically the whole concept behind it, Adam, was hypnotherapists work a lot on their own. And there was people who were working in one town and didn't even know a hypnotherapist, the nearest one to them, or whatever. And it's not that there was any kind of national association for people to come together. So it was like, okay. So the objective literally became a number of different things. One was to connect people, to kind of almost create a community. The second was that would have been done through bringing people together and through learning, as in a conference, people coming in. The next part, I suppose, was to expand the awareness within the Irish hypnotherapy community of all of the other stuff that goes on around the world, because I felt we were kind of insular, and maybe I'm wrong on that, but I felt we were kind of insular. And then the last part, because we as therapists know the power of hypnotherapy and that ability to allow people to change, is to break down the barriers that the general public would have regarding hypnotherapy, and not just on, it's known for smoking and weight loss and various bits like that, the fears and phobias. But I suppose, as we promote the stuff more, as more people see the evidence of the mind-body connection and how we can use it to manage stress, anxiety, stuff that people are literally tapping or popping tablets for, but never addressing the cause behind it, or either that or spending a year in talk therapy where actually this is all in the emotional brain and it takes so long to get there through talk therapy that it's a really painful process. So it's about giving people the awareness that hypnotherapy is a solution and it's fast and it's much quicker and much more effective. And that way, kind of everybody wins, the public, the therapists, everybody.
Absolutely. And you've been interviewing all of these kind of 30 guests, 30 speakers for the conference, with the exception of yourself. You obviously
Yes.
for you to kind of interview yourself. So I'm kind of stepping in to play your role. So tell us about what you're going to be talking about at the conference.
Yeah, the topic I'm talking about is about adoption. It's a personal topic because I am adopted. And it's something that I've kind of have lived with all my life. It's also something that I understand really deeply, as a consequence of living it. But secondly, I work a lot with adopted people. And the normal approach is the psychotherapy approach. If people but if you actually think about that whole topic of, particularly when it happens to somebody at such a young age, um, there's not the cognitive memory of many of this. It's emotional. And that's where hypnotherapy steps in. It's huge. It's helped me to literally transform so much of my life and those beliefs that I had about myself. Uh, but it's much wider than just a child because there's so many things involved. I mean, and it depends. What I would always say is adoption is something that happens. So if you're talking about the child, but there is the child, there is the birth parent or parents, and the impact on both of those. And there's also the adopting parents and how that impacts them. Um, and in on the topic of adoption, people don't necessarily even think that it's a significant issue. However, if somebody comes in and like some of the core concepts of adoption would be a feeling of rejection, feeling of loss, of grief, a feeling of trying to prove yourself because you just don't feel good enough. Now, that can happen to anybody, and I'm not saying it can't, because literally life happens on top of all of being adopted. However, when if you know that someone is adopted, then you know that there's something to look at and it goes back a lot deeper than it might do in another case. Also, as you work with people who are adopted, you know that it's all really early childhood stuff. And you know the core areas in which to go because children in general will feel that it's their fault, even because they don't understand. They were used to a certain connection and now suddenly it's gone. There's no knowledge. There's a fear of authority that comes with that. And then there's the impact on the parents themselves. I mean, in my own case, you know, my birth mother literally turned to alcohol, you know, so it affects, there's a whole lot of guilt and shame that comes with that too. Um, I suppose the whole idea of me discussing the topic is Ireland has had a checkered past in terms of adoption. Logically, it makes perfect sense. You take a child from somewhere that's, you know, where it may not be provided the best home and give it a proper home. But that's the logical side of it. And most of the issues around adoption are not logical. They're absolutely emotional and they come up from absolutely nowhere. Um, so that's why I wanted to talk about it. There is that we've had this very checkered past in our history with adoption. Um, and it's not really something that's spoken about as openly as it should be, and definitely in a hypnotherapy context. And I know that from working with a lot of people. You know, and actually, again, you could nearly say that London 2022 had played a big role in even in that because um, I met Sheila Granger out there, and she and I were both talking, and she's adopted as well. So we ended up having a conversation, and then we ended up running a training program for hypnotherapists to work with adopted people last July. So it's a bit like, you know, creating the awareness of it, creating the tools, because there's adoption issues all over the world. And it doesn't necessarily limit itself to adoption either, because it can move into fostering, and there's slightly different issues around that, and I get that. But a lot of the core issues will actually be the same. And there's loads of feelings of rejection of not being good enough, and it's all of that and support people through it.
Absolutely. And, th those feelings of rejection, may not even be fully, kind of based on the idea of an actual rejection, because a lot of young mothers, there's a huge amount of societal pressure for them to kind of go through certain pathways that maybe they felt they had no choice. And it wasn't
Absolutely.
necessarily a rejection, but more, they're on the receiving end of feeling coercion and other psychological
Correct.
kind of principles. Who is the talk for? Is it for hypnotherapists to help them deal better with people that were adopted, or for people that have gone through the process of adoption?
It's for anyone who is interested in the topic of adoption. My objective really is to create more of an awareness around it, more awareness around the issues that underlie it, and to empower hypnotherapists, because obviously it's a hypnotherapy conference. So what I'm really aiming to do is empower hypnotherapists to firstly be aware of the issue, because there's a number of issues out there that people that hypnotherapy is well able to help in a really profound way. But people aren't aware that they can actually help, or they're not even aware of those issues. Adoption will be one of those. Um, because it is early childhood work. It's really early childhood work. And it's core work. And that's for the child, but then there's the parent as well. You know, if a mother has given up a child, or if a father gets a knock on the door from a child he didn't even know he ever had, which is another side of that. Father didn't have a say in what happened, you know, and didn't even, or well, whatever. There's a whole load of different scenarios that take place, but it's how then people can be supported through that process, because all of those are emotional. Every single thing is emotional. Um, it's about allowing hypnotherapists, I suppose, the space in which to be aware of it and then to support people through it.
And I imagine hypnotherapists, you know, attending that talk would also get some value. So even if they're working with someone that isn't adopted, it increases levels of empathy and understanding and the
Correct.
ability to kind of dig deeper to kind of find the nuance that's taking place there. Um, If someone's listening to this and they like the idea of seeing your talk at the Irish Hypnotherapy Conference, where can they learn more about the conference or buy tickets to see you?
Yeah, it's www.irishhypnotherapyconference.ie, and it is on the 5th and 6th of April in the Clayton Hotel, Liffey Valley in Dublin. And all the details are there. And it's going to be an amazing conference with 30 speakers, including you, um, presenting on so many different topics. And this one, anyone who's interested in the topic of adoption, you will learn so much about it. You will learn not just from the child's perspective, but anyone who's interested in early childhood, the impact on children, the impact on the parents, societal impacts that go around it, that maybe even caused it, um, and even on the adopting parents and how it affects them. So it's a fairly detailed conversation.
Fantastic. And now is the time to get tickets if you're interested in the Irish Hypnotherapy Conference, because there are early bird offers. So check
There
out
are
that
till
website.
December 31st, and after that, then it starts to move up a little bit. So,
Fair dues. Excellent. Well, check that out and we'll see you there.
great. Thank you, Adam.